On today's podcast, I share the 3 truths that can transform your perspective on work, and these are not mine. I've said them in a semblance, but the summary and beautifulness of these come from Rich Wilkerson, who's an incredible pastor I follow. And then you get to laugh at me. You get to laugh at my integration of these lessons in the story of the podcast studios and the multiple journeys I've taken to get here, because this one's about to be gone as well. And so all of that in today's episode. So without further ado, let's get into the show. And welcome back to another episode where this might be like one of the last times you see this studio, because I'm going to become a backpack princess again soon, because we're moving and I don't have office space in the new house yet. And I don't know if I'm going to get another office, and I'm still looking for a short bus I can paint pink and put a studio in. And none of that has anything to do with today's podcast, except it 100% ties in. Because today we're going to talk about the 3 truths that can transform your perspective on work. And this is from a pastor who I can't wait to meet one day, who I highly admire and respect, who my dear friend Lauren has shared with me, and his name is Rich Wilkerson. And he tends to speak in a way that just tickles my soul. And one of my favorite things is that he does these breakdowns on leadership and leading teams. And as entrepreneurs, we're leaders, right? Even if we're a solopreneur, we're leading ourselves. We're leading our customers. We're leading the people that we help. We might be leading teams, but leadership is really, really the lens in which we choose to see ourselves, knowing that there's no finish line in this game, and it's really constantly about growth. And I came across this one a couple of weeks ago, and it's been on my list to record, and it tickles at a very, very deep level. And the reason I'm talking about me not having a studio is because it ties in directly to this episode. And so I'm going to read you his words, and then I'm going to share with you the 3 truths that can transform your perspective on work. So what he says it's not a question of if you will face challenges. It's simply a matter of when. Leadership is defined in the in-between moments, the hardships, setbacks, reroutes, and momentary hurdles along the way. And so if you find yourself navigating one of these moments today, consider that the way out is through. It can be tempting to avoid the struggle, but if you'll lean into the stretch, I believe you'll find strength and growth for yourself and your teams. And I know this is cheesy, and I know this is silly, but I reference that kid's book for Branson all the time. You can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't go around it, you have to go through it. And typically, the resistance that we're facing is the path to get to the next level, the path to find clarity, the path to find growth when we dig through it. And these 3 truths that he shares are incredibly powerful and proactive in shifting our mindset, right? You guys know I had my dear friend Alex Sharfin on the show, and one of Alex's favorite quotes is, "You don't have the business you want because you haven't become the person to run it." And that really boils down to perspective, right? This game's going to change. It changes every day. And I have personally experienced the most amount of pain, struggle, overwhelm, exhaustion when I thought there was a finish line, like I made it, like, oh, this is working, it's going to last forever. No, it's just a matter of time before another challenge comes up. So what are the 3 truths? Truth number 1 is you don't have to, you get to. Now, in the personal development world, this is something they drilled into us very, very deeply. And then we've had brain experts on the show, doctors of brain on the show. We've talked about gratitude. We've talked about how to reflex that muscle. Sharon Lechter, who wrote Outwitting the Devil, who's a friend of mine, talks about how our thoughts dictate our words, which dictate our actions. And really, the internal dialogue or story that we use is the one that dictates the view of the world that we see in front of us. So truth number 1 is you don't have to, you get to. And his explanation of this is beautiful. You will never build something great with an attitude of obligation. And I believe that to be true. And if you've listened to the show more than a few episodes and you know any ounce of my story, or the multiple stories or multiple hurdles, or at this point, God's comical sense of humor, is that the moment you tell God you have a plan, just sit back and get ready to laugh. it really all is opportunity. And one of the quotes that I've written down that I heard somebody say, or maybe I came up with it, I don't even know at this point, but for me, I have these daily reminders on how to shift my mindset and shift my perspective and find the silver lining or look at what's underneath it. And one of my favorite ones recently is they're not interruptions, they're just invitations for God, because if they weren't mine, they wouldn't be showing up in my purview. But at the deepest level, we don't have to do any of this. We get to. We get to choose this. It's an honor and a gift to be able to do this. So that's truth number one. Truth number two. I love this one. If you want to harvest, fall in love with the work. Building a vision for the long term starts with putting in the work in the short term. Now, in our alliance, right? So if you guys don't know about the alliance, our Relationship Speed Algorithms Alliance, it's our coaching group. It's $100 a month, but this is one of the things that I focus on the most. And I say you have to seed before you weed, which means no matter what, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be resistance, there's going to be fires that show up in our ecosystem that we get to address every day. But when we seed before we weed, it means that we're intentionally spending time planting seeds for our future or our long-term vision, whether that's in our health, our mindset, our business, our faith. And we always protect those with consistency and discipline before we go navigate the rest of the world. And so truth number two is, if you want to harvest, you must fall in love with the work, because the moment you plant a seed in the ground, it does not grow and sprout. Just like when I lost 100 pounds again, and this time I'm keeping it off forever. But I didn't gain it overnight, and I didn't lose it overnight. And I couldn't just go to the gym for one day and expect to look in the mirror and see a different person. That's where stretching comes in. And so if you want to harvest, you get to fall in love with the work. And then truth number three is seasons of struggle squeeze out strength. And you really know I love alliterations, right? So the 4 S's. Seasons of struggle squeeze out strength. Often the best outcomes are birthed out of opposition. And yes, 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 and yes. And to talk about the podcast studio, and I haven't done an episode for this, but a lot of you know I used to record in my studio, and I loved that studio. It was my home away from home, and quite frankly, it's where I nested and where I had solace and peace when Lindsay and I started navigating conscious uncoupling. And probably one of the proudest things was having that space for clients to come into, that space to record podcasts. Like, I poured every ounce of my attention to detail into that thing. And it took me 3 years from start to finish to get it to its after state. And literally, I was at the finish line and there was one light left to hang in the ceiling. And my buddy TJ, love you, TJ, was like, let's hang it. So I called TJ and I was like, come to the office. We'll measure this. We'll build this. We'll get it hung so I can just get this off the floor. And my landlord and I had agreed to, 20 years, and we're in Montana. So we spit on it. We handshake on it. And literally TJ comes to the office, and 2 days later, my phone rings and my landlord calls, and he's like, hey man, I've been dreading this phone call. We had a family emergency. And I'm like, what do you need? He's like, I need you out at the office. And I was like, I got you. I hear you. How can I support you and your family? And I cried for about, 20 minutes. And then the crying turned into just jovial laughter, because I couldn't go back and change it. I wasn't going to fight him on it. Of course, like, his family gets it. That was my default answer. And I had this moment of like mourning. But then I also recognized that it was the closing of a chapter. And I didn't realize that office had become my hiding place. And I didn't realize how much things had creeped in. But that obstacle seemed massive. So I moved the studio home, and I'm sitting in what you see. I built this in 24 hours in a room downstairs in the house. And I was like, got it. Well, I'm going to be here. I'll be here for the next 12 months. And this is where we're going to rock it. This is where we're going to grow. And then there were these hidden benefits. Like, I got to see Branson and Cheyenne and my family an extra 2 hours a day. I got to reduce the 70 miles a day that I was commuting to the office when I went to the office. And those were opportunities that I didn't see existed, because I was just so linearly driven in that office, and even changed how I do one-on-one consulting, to where people used to come in my office and I loved it. We had the whiteboard. It was this whole experience. But now I've been doing my intensives, and when you come to town to do an intensive with me or a VIP day or a 3-day consulting trip, I have you book an Airbnb, and then we do it in the Airbnb, and then people actually started getting better results because they were comfortable. We could actually work more. They were in their space, and I could bring my son over, and it was closer to a lot of the experiential things in Montana that I like to show people. And so there was like this massive, massive beneficial outcomes that came that I couldn't see. And then I was like, great. And I got completely settled in this office. You can see, like, I didn't finish hanging anything up. Like, if you're watching this on video, there's still a picture of Branson on the floor because I just put it there temporarily and I didn't hang it up. And someone's like, you should just leave it on the floor. And I'm like, totally. And then I go off the grid a couple of weeks ago for a Ben's event. And in the 4 days I was off the grid, a lot of stuff in our personal life changed. And I turned my phone on and Lindsay's like, we're moving. And I was like, when? And she's like, in 6 weeks. And there's not an office space in the new house. And I literally just had to laugh. And so as quick as I put this studio up a couple of months ago, I'm going to be quickly tearing it down. And I don't know what's next. I don't have an office. I don't have a location. I don't have a plan. I know I have a laptop, a camera, and a microphone, and I live in Montana, and it's nice for the next couple of months. And so I'm just calling myself the backpack princess. And so I'm just going to set up for my calls in my yard or outside, or I'll see if I can steal Wi-Fi from somebody and drive to a mountain somewhere. I'll figure something out. And I'm sure there's so many beautiful lessons in it that I haven't seen yet, and opportunities that I haven't embraced yet, and possibilities that I can't see. But one of them was it led me to clarity that I want to be able to take this podcast on the road. And we do events, and we have an event coming up, which I'm sure you've seen about or you'll hear about by the time this episode comes out. And I want to be able to drive it to events. And I was like, what if I buy a short bus? What if I make it pink and I build the studio in it, and then I never have to rebuild the studio again? I can have a bed, Branson and I can travel, people can come sit in the short bus with me, and we can do this podcast. And I only had that clarity after these stepping stones kind of fell into place that I used to consider massive, massive roadblocks. But really, it was this perspective shift of how this season of what I used to consider struggle changed my adversity muscle and my resiliency. And I no longer allow the wrapping paper to get in the way of the outcome. And these truths are powerful. And I wish it was more complicated, but it's not. It's always the simplistic things that we come back to that keep us in the game, and protecting the outcome, and focusing on where we give our energy and what our frame of mind is when we're moving into that territory. And I've lost every single game that I went into thinking I was going to lose the game. And I've won or made progress in every game where I wasn't building my confidence or pulling my confidence based on my abilities, but my intent. And there might even be some of you I lose. You might listen to this podcast. I'm like, I don't want to listen or watch anymore because he's recording in his yard. I don't know. That's not up for me. I'm going to keep doing my best. I'm going to give my all. I'm going to put my heart into this, and I'm going to trust the process and trust God and allow the pieces to fall into place. But these simple truths are really, really good reminders for us on what it takes to have the right perspective to achieve success. Because for so many years as an entrepreneur, I struggled because, number one, I thought there were finish lines. And number two, every single challenge I looked at as resistance instead of opportunity. And in being in this for almost 2 decades and having the ability and the gift of having literally some of the most powerful friends on the planet that have done more things than I could ever imagine, that I might never even get close. Every single time they're hit with a hurdle, they're like, great, opportunity. Like I have a friend. And one day I was sitting with him and he's like, I need 750 grand by tomorrow. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I had to do this, I did this. I'm like, what are you going to do? He's like, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. And I just get to sit here and witness this. And it like stretched me to the core. But it was really about having the right mindset when it goes into business, when it goes into leading your team, leading yourself, the energy that we put into our inputs that create those results. And so I wanted to share these with you today, and also share the story of the studio, because I have hundreds of those examples, hundreds. And what I can confidently say now, and I will die on this hill, that if you have a vision and you believe it, I don't care if anybody else believes it or sees it, but you believe it and you can picture it and you hold it with the right perspective, you're guaranteed to get there or get closer than you ever thought possible, as long as you have the right perspective going into it. Is it simple? 1,000%. Easy? No. Nope, not at all. There's seasons, there's up and downs. It's emotional roller coasters, right? It's, as Jeff Spencer said to me a long time ago, tighten your seatbelt and just get ready for the ride, because you can't get off of it the moment you choose to become an entrepreneur. But these perspectives tend to be really easy pattern interrupts and reminders to anchor us back into what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so I'm going to share these 3 truths with you one more time just to wrap the show. And so truth number 1 is you don't have to, you get to, because you will never build something great with an attitude of obligation. Truth number 2, if you want a harvest, fall in love with the work. Building your vision for the long term starts with putting in the work consistently in the short term. And number 3, seasons of struggle squeeze out strength. Often the best outcomes are birthed out of opposition. So Rich Wilkerson, if you ever listen to this, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being a leader. Thank you for dropping knowledge bombs and God bombs all the time. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with the world. And thank you for giving me an incredible thing to share on this show that's also incredibly helpful for me. And if you're listening to this, I invite you to flex these muscles. I invite you to use these truths. And I invite you to keep shifting your perspective so that you can create the outcomes and the results that you desire in the vision that maybe only you see. And so that's where I'm going to wrap the show. And it's even funny because it's summer in Montana, but it snowed today on June something. And so I don't know why I shared that. I just felt like sharing that. But I love you to pieces. I appreciate you. I wish you the most beautiful, beautiful, beautiful of days. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms, especially the one with yourself. God bless you to absolute pieces. And I'll either see you in the next episode or you'll hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.